Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Joe Allam, and I'm joined by a good friend, Vince Perry, who
Yes.
I must say is one of the smoothest guys I know. And your setup today is smooth. This is a very cool setup. How you doing, Vince?
I'm doing pretty good. It's pretty early here in Seattle, and I knew coming onto the stream, I needed to make sure my lighting was set up if I was going to be here with Joe Allen himself.
I mean, dude, this is probably the coolest setup I've seen. It's I feel like I'm having some sort of VIP interview, all access, and you're gonna dish out some creative knowledge on all things film photography and whatever, which I think is what we're actually talking about today. So this is gonna work out well. So just a little bit of a housekeeping aspect for Adobe Live. So we are live on Behance, but if you're joining us on YouTube, you can continue watching there, but we are going to be monitoring the chat on Behance only. So make sure you hop over to Behance and go to the live stream, and you can join in and get some conversation going. We're going to be monitoring the chat, or rather, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat, and whilst Vince is showing some of his work and going through some workflows and whatever. So I'm going to keep my eyes on the chat, and I can see some familiar faces in there as well, which is always great to see. We've always got a very global audience on here, and that's ever apparent with the guests that we've got. So Vince joined from Seattle, but I believe you got some London work to share today.
Yeah,
and
I've got quite a bit.
It's if you're unaware of Vince's work, I'm just going to take a moment here to give you some high praise, because I love your photography work and your video work. So Vince has a YouTube channel sharing some of your photography and film photography, and your recent stuff, the London project. If you could just give a little rundown on how that came about and what it was, because I love it so much, man.
Yeah. Well, it could be really long or it could be short. So I'm going to go somewhere in the middle. I'd say, it really kind of started back in 2018 was the first time that I went out to London, but that's not the first time I started shooting for the project. But I think that's when the seed was planted, basically just through my interactions and experience with the people there in the city itself. I just basically fell in love with London. And I was just itching to get back in 2019, the following year, and just made plans to come back, and literally just wanted to get out there and shoot and connect with people. I recently just moved to Seattle from Salt Lake City, and shooting in Seattle was exciting for me, but it wasn't going the way I intended it to go. With shooting with people, like I reach out to connect with people, and that wasn't really happening to me or happening for me. So I was like, let me go back to somewhere where I feel like my creativity can just be free and kind of just have that freedom and run wild. So I made plans to go back to London, reached out to like several agencies, modeling agencies out there to set up shoots with people, reconnected with, old friends that I had met the year prior, people that I kept in touch with really online. So it's really just all stemmed from that genuine love and, just trying to do my best to show or give, a little bit of light to London. Not that it needs any more, but just try to show it, in my perspective, in my eye, and also just kind of pay homage to all the love that I've, been shown, and, show it in the right light as well. Not come there and just, take from London, but, give as well, with the relationships and, show that I'm, really invested in the culture there, invested in the people, and, continue to build those ties. So that's mainly kind of what the project has been based around. It's not necessarily any specific subject matter, except for how my experience goes, more or less kind of documenting that, whether it's through planned shoots with people doing portraits, or street photography or travel photography, or what you may call it, just anywhere I'm pointing my lenses ends up being in that umbrella, or falling under that umbrella.
Yeah, I mean, it comes across that way in your videos, and I mean, even when we met up, when you came over here for that, and it felt like you were documenting your relationship with London. It was your relationship with London as a place and the contents of it. And you're definitely the online networker. Even the way that we first met, I mean, you'd been a viewer on my YouTube channel for years. And when I went out to Seattle last year and you messaged me like, hey, you're coming, do you want me to show you around? And I was like, that sounds brilliant, let's do it. And since then I see you popping up all over the place, and I'm like, damn, Vince, you're making it everywhere. And the way that your photography has shaped and evolved, even from when we went shooting in Seattle, and it's interesting to see or to hear you say that you didn't really feel like you were fitting to what Seattle was offering at the time, and then seeing what you produced when you came to London. I'm like, okay, this is what I feel you were wanting, and this is what maybe you were missing previously. But yeah, so the London project, which is on your YouTube channel, how many episodes is that now? It's
I think I just put one actually up or yesterday my time, so Sunday. I think we're up to 15 or 14. I still have, I think, 5 or 6 more episodes to go. I think I put out like 4 videos this week because they were a little bit easier to kind of churn out. I've kind of gotten to the portion of the project itself where I'm not so much in the videos. It's more or less kind of the photos and then the person that I shot with the exception of the last one. So, throughout the whole series, I think it's been really cool to show the video side and the photos. And I, honestly, the inspiration comes full circle. You speaking highly of my work, I appreciate that so much because, I watched you for so much time before, we actually met. And it's funny that you mentioned coming to Seattle just last year, because I remember we were actually in Cologne at Photokina around the same time too as well.
That's true. So,
yeah. So, I think it's kind of cool to, just see it all come full circle. But the last video of the series I'll be in, and it has like a very kind of like, I think somber is like the right word, but I'm not sure. It's like, it has like a certain tone to it to where like, the series, it was like riding high, but then at the end, it's like, it's time to kind of go back to, the mundane and the norm of, where I'm at, and which is Seattle. And so it's been a lot of fun. And I think I've grown a lot too, just as an editor, with both photo and video, just kind of being able to kind of work through that whole backlog of work and, work through something that means so much.
Yeah, I've just seen a few people in the chat saying they were at Photokina as well. And yeah, it was the last one. It's kind of on hold indefinitely for the moment, which is a very sad turn of events. But
right,
it's an industry that has been shifting and rapidly evolving over the last like 20, 30 years or so as digital has come about and smartphones and whatever.
Right.
And it seems that a lot of the major brands are wanting to have their own press events rather than all lumped into this major. It's a massive expo, isn't it? So I don't know if Photokina will ever be back. Anyway, should we have a look at some of your images and Lightroom, I believe?
Yeah, I've quite a few pulled up here. We'll go through a few. We could go through them all. Kind of browse through like a few quickly, but kind of just continuing on from speaking about London, this first shot here of just like a half shot of the eye. It's funny because when I went back and looked at this photo, I was like, I feel like this looks like a shot that Joe would take, and I feel like I've kind of seen this somewhere in maybe like one of your videos, and it's just funny just to see the inspiration come full circle. But this is actually one of my favorite shots, from the project, one that I took in London. I mean, I've only been twice, but every time that I've gone, I've always just gone and shot the eye. And I wanted to provide a little bit of a different perspective with this one here, just kind of going with this half shot from the Westminster side. So this is shot on film, medium format here. I believe the film stock for this one was Kodak Ektar 100.
Okay.
So a little bit slower speed film. Typically this film will have like a lot of like saturation and pop, but I think I shot this at like maybe like f32 or somewhere like around there. So I'm finding like
I actually just looked up the EXIF info.
Yeah, there's like
tell me that no.
Yeah, there's like nothing there at all. So I think when I'm kind of like getting stopped down like that, you lose like a lot of I guess saturation from like all the light that's coming in from what I've noticed. But this was actually a lab scan that I got from a local lab here in Seattle that I've been going to since I pretty much have dived deeper into film, which I did at the beginning of 2019. But the first time I picked up a film camera was in 2018. I actually have it right here. This is like my Canon AE1, 35 millimeter film camera. And I bought that in like spring 2018. But film was kind of just mainly...
Is in one of these?
Yeah. It was kind of just like mainly just something I would kind of just do on the side to digital, but it's kind of transformed for me now to being the main medium to shoot, although I still shoot digital and finding my way back to that now with buying an X-T3. But yeah, so this is a lab scan. But when I get these lab scans back, this is how it looks coming back from the lab. It's not too much different from like what I've done. It's just a little bit brighter, just pops a little bit more. And it just appears to be a little bit warmer, but it kind of varies, from time to time what I may do to my film photos, just depending on what I can get back. And sometimes it can be a little bit hit or miss, which is one reason why I resorted to scanning at home, just to have that complete control and save costs. I know Kyle McDougall mentioned that on the show as well. So, if there's anybody out there that watched that, you'll probably hear some of the same things from me as well. When I go in and do my post-processing, I try not to do too much and try to just keep it maybe as like what I remember the scene, unless like the scan is just completely just off. But with these, it's not too much going on, just kind of pulling some of the contrast down, trying to pull the highlights up, the shadows, the whites, just drop the blacks a little bit. But one thing that I do on all of my photos, I always bring in a curve. And I find that the preset curves within Lightroom are actually pretty good. So coming here, just like with the linear one, I just literally just drop down and I typically will just go like medium or strong. And then from that point, like if I need to go in here and adjust it, then I can. But I typically find that these presets for the curves work out for me pretty good. And then didn't mess with any of the hues or like saturation or luminance. I find that I don't do that too. Yeah, I find that I don't really do that too much with landscape type of shots or street shots. But within my portraiture, I find that I may mess around with that just because of skin tones.
Yeah, your portraiture has definitely got a style to it. The amount of times, like when I've got push notifications on for people's Instagrams and whatever, and it pops up on my watch and it just shows the image, it doesn't show the name or anything.
Yeah.
And you of a few other people as well, I see it and I'm like, that's a Vince shot. I can tell it straight away.
Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting process. I was actually watching a video today from one of my friends, just like finding your style. And honestly, it's just come, I guess, from continued reps. And I still feel like I'm still trying to define what that is, even with actually taking the photos, but with also like the way that I like to edit. I feel like right now I'm kind of in this mode of just wanting to kind of like have photos that pop like with color, but it's like not too much, and then they just, I guess, appear very like airy and kind of clean.
Yeah, the airiness is something I struggle to replicate if I was to do some edits. I mean, I've always struggled with portraiture anyway, but there's some sort of element of, I don't know, there's so much detail in it, but at the same time it feels light, like it's not heavy. It's
it's one of those things. I mean, honestly, given the time that, you know, being in London in 2019 and, you know, not actually putting the project out until this year, even though it's a continuation, I originally had edits that I had done to the film, like when I got it back from the lab and everything, and they were like very similar. But even then, before like a month or two, I had the photos done when I came back to Seattle. Sometimes I kind of found myself trying to go like too low on like contrast, and sometimes it will kind of create like this really weird look, I think, for the portrait sometimes, where they don't have like any depth really. They'll kind of use like that depth of field a little bit with the background and the foreground, and obviously the subject as well. So
when it comes to this sort of lighter area style, how much of that do you sort of, I guess, set yourself up in camera? Because I imagine so much of it having the vision beforehand on, you know, this is a lighter feeling shot, or what do you do within the camera that then helps set you up when you come into your edit, or how much of it is done in the edit to add that lightness but detail? It's
no, that's a really good question. You know, Kyle, it's so funny because I watched Kyle's stream again today, but you know, he hit the nail right on the head. Is when you asked him about just a dynamic range of film, you know, it's really all coming down to the exposure that you're doing. So typically, let's say like with a stock like Portra 400, I think it's pretty common for people to meter that film at ISO 200 just to get a little bit more shadow detail, and it creates like a more flatter image. And I find with Portra, I've shot like 160, 400, and 800. It kind of provides like a almost like open canvas, open landscape, a clean palette for you to kind of just go in and make it like how you want. Although that the film has its like specific look and its kind of characteristics, you know, film can be so different from, you know, where you get the film developed at, you know, which lab scans it. If you're scanning it at home, it can look totally different depending on what equipment people are using. But once you get into Lightroom, that's when you can get in there and, you know, kind of put your touch on, you know, what you're doing. And I definitely see me shooting film and then me still having the post process ability to just do that. Like I still able to control like how I want it to look. Like a scan is just the start of the process for me, as far as like, you know, you going to something that's physical to something that you see like on the screen, you know. And it's just, the scan is just the starting process. And I've seen people before that they've mentioned film as, you know, something being like unedited, it's like not filtered. I've seen that on social media, and I'm like, no, that's like not true. There's somebody at a lab that's a lab tech that's working on this, and they're just doing like the work for you, because otherwise it's just an amber piece of you know, film, obviously, until you know, you get in, you convert everything. So it's an interesting process. So, you know, shooting with the proper exposure, typically if you're overexposing, you're going to get a little bit more detail. I think you'll have a little bit more latitude to play with, as opposed like if you're going in a situation where it's underexposed. I have a photo right here that's severely underexposed that I didn't shoot at the right exposure at all. But to kind of create that like airiness, that's a little bit harder to do at night. But you still can do it if you're getting a lot of detail when you're shooting with your exposure, like you're doing longer exposures. I've done night photography with film with like longer exposures, maybe of like 2 to 8 seconds, just depending. And I've been able to see those image pop and be bright. So it just kind of really like all depends on like, the lighting. Sometimes that's kind of like setting you up. But a shot like this here is just this is a perfect example of not getting the right exposure, because before, this is literally how my lab scan came back. It's very faded.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm talking about, where the lab scan is literally just, or not even just the lab scan, a scan in general is just the starting point of you digitizing the image. But, being able to come in, I'm able to create something that is usable for me. Like, this is something that I would use, and I actually posted it the other day. And it was pretty interesting for me to see like the area work that I've been doing versus something that's like this, that's more gritty and has, obviously a way more distinct style to it. But I still like this. But I think, a lot of it too is just like, the type of lighting conditions that you're in, for sure.
So these, so the file format that comes back from the labs, are they DNGs?
So it depends on, what you end up ordering from them. So this one is a JPEG. This one isn't even like the max scan. Now you can get TIFFs as well. And let me go over to some recent lab scans. That's like a higher resolution, I suppose, as compared to that one. And a little bit similar type of, style with the grittiness, but it just has a little bit more detail compared to like if I'm scanning on a flatbed, because at home I have an Epson V600. But then it really all depends on, what your lab is doing and, who's controlling that color correction process. Because even getting this back, this is after my adjustments, and having the scan come in just like this. But I feel like at this point, like I know what to do. And I think one of the number one things to kind of kill this fade that's happening is honestly like this curve here. So like I mentioned, I feel like this is my sauce here. Like my secret sauce is literally just using this curve and
curvy sauce.
Just going with. I really do just like the presets that are in here in Lightroom, honestly. And it's just kind of like a whole finessing movement when it comes to like processing the film. There's so much that can be done, and so much that goes on sometimes as well.
Do you find you have the same amount of flexibility, or do you ever feel there are limitations, even though film itself has a greater dynamic range? But when it comes into digital, do you still feel that dynamic range?
I don't think I feel it. Honestly, I don't. I feel like, digital and film both have their limitations. I feel like film handles highlights, clipping like a lot better than what digital would. Say here, for like example, this is an image here that's like pretty bright. And I can still see a little bit of what's going on here in the background, but I don't feel like digital would hold on to this as well. But when it comes to like shooting at night, flipping to something like this, I feel like digital would have been a lot easier for me to do. I would have been able to take the photo and reference, the exposure. But at the same time too, this is kind of like almost like an operator error type of deal, to where like if I go to an image like this where I've gotten like a proper exposure like at night, I can still, have that, I guess, that dynamic range and achieve the look that I do. It's not necessarily that film isn't good at night. It's just a matter of trying to have that that exposure, just having that technique and getting those reps. And, this is recent work of mine. We can obviously see a difference between how this photo is and how I got a pretty solid exposure compared to the other one. Let me see if I can pull that one up here side by side. But, this is like pretty much almost like a year apart, and just having more experience of shooting film at night is just getting those reps has just been super helpful.
Yeah, there's a question actually. So Angus is saying your work's very expressive with a great sense of place. What is your balance between personal and commercial work?
Wow, that's a good question. I feel like it's a good mixture. I work full time currently. I work for Amazon actually, and I started working at the beginning of March. But working that job, I still, freelance on the side. But this whole year has been a mess, for everyone. I wouldn't say that I'm always consistently booking work, but this image here, this was like from a couple of weeks ago that a family booked me for like a shoot. Like, I guess if you want to consider that paid work still commercial, although it's not like for some big brand. I don't really find myself shooting a lot for like brands. It's more or less people kind of seeing the work that I do. Yeah. More so like the portraits, and they're like, hey, can you come and like do this for me? So this was from like a couple of weeks ago. We did like kind of like a family style, like editorial, different type of vibe than normal. Just, we're going to go to a park or something. And this shot is actually on the XT3. Okay. So my process for that, I've been kind of moving around quite a bit with it, trying to see what's what, just learning Fuji. One of my attractions to hopping into Fuji actually was being able to use those profiles and being able to shoot raw and still use those profiles. And I love how we can go in here in the profile and we can see I have Acros V2, but having those specific camera profiles, depending on the camera you have. I think there was a new profile that came out. I can't remember what it's called, but
bleach bypass.
Is it? I think it's that, and it's something like might be like classic neg or
classic
something
neg,
like that.
Yeah.
So I've kind of have gone in here and just kind of hovering over these different profiles. And, kind of, again, almost using those profiles just like how I would use a film stock. That's essentially just the foundation for like what I want to do. More oftentimes than not, like even though I may get something back that looks pretty solid, I still may apply some tweaks just to kind of like, just give it my own taste, give it my own flavor. So that's something that, I like to do. And I've been very interested in doing more black and white work. I feel like I haven't like done enough. So being able to shoot on the XT3 and, get back into doing digital, because I feel like I'm not just like a film photographer. I'm not just like a digital. I feel like a hybrid.
Yeah.
And, they're both going to have their place. I mean, with this being a client shoot, I brought my film camera, obviously like shooting this photo, but then I have my digital and film. So I was like balancing both so I can still make sure I'm having, all the exposures and everything like that. Cause sometimes too, you can shoot a blank roll. When I went to London, I literally just shot film and I wasn't nervous at all. But when I got on the plane, they were like trying to put my film through the X-ray. And I was like, I wasn't having it. I was like, throwing a fit. And, like I've shot blank rolls sometimes things don't come back. And, if you're doing commercial work, you just kind of have to be like mindful of that. So having that digital backup, I think is always good.
Well, with the, so when you came and did the London project, so that night that we met up and you opened your bag and it was just overflowing with film and you're like, I don't know which one's spent, which one's ready to be used.
Yeah.
But the thing that I found so I had so much admiration for was the fact that you came for 5 days, maybe a week.
I came, it was 6 full days.
Yeah.
And then on the 7th day, I actually did a shoot that morning, which I shouldn't have done. That actually caused me to miss my flight. But it was great because I missed my flight and then I actually ended up getting to spend a night in New York. So they rebooked me. I had an overnight in New York and I got to hang out with some friends there. But yeah, I was just being so ambitious to get out and shoot. I really feel like I can do so much. So sometimes
in that time, I'm shocked that you managed to make like 14 good quality YouTube videos out of that time.
Thank you.
But just hearing like you were on shoots multiple times throughout the day. So what is your process in because you were meeting up with agencies and they were handing off to various models and stuff. And I imagine that makes your life easier as a photographer, working with professional models who know how to pose and work with you as much as you're working with them. But yeah, how do you go about finding that in a completely different country? What's your process?
I feel like I'm just like a super inquisitive person. Like whenever I get on, or whenever I have questions, I literally just get on Google or I get on YouTube and like how to do this or how to do that. It was something that I originally started doing here in Seattle. It was funny because literally like right before the trip, I kind of started getting some momentum for like shooting again, late spring and more so into the summer, and just figuring out basically how to do test shoots and, essentially just finding the contact numbers or emails of these specific modeling agencies. I just did a Google of like modeling agencies in London, top modeling agencies in London, etc. I think I probably sent out like 22 emails or something like that. I think I maybe heard back from like 10 agencies. I end up setting up like, I did 17 shoots, portrait shoots. And only one of those, two of those were with people that like weren't with an agency, just kind of like some mutual connections. And it kind of like streamlined the process. That's what I figured out. And that's what I wanted to have. I didn't really want to go back and forth over social media or, more so like Instagram direct message, because sometimes things get lost and people kind of forget. So there was a little bit more accountability. But even still, when I've done that, it's still not even a perfect process. I was actually meant to do more shoots. I had a few get canceled. I had a few contacts kind of just drop off even from an agency side. But it's really just about going and doing the searching. Now, to afford yourself that opportunity, you just have to essentially build up your portfolio in a way that is appealing to them. With test shoots, honestly, the more simple they are, the better. And it's beneficial for both sides. You as the photographer, a model's getting to update their book. And when it comes to the experience of those people, some people have been with agencies longer. It really all depends. More often than not, you'll be shooting with new faces at the agency, people that have maybe just been signed. So they may not actually be that experienced in the industry, but then some people already have come from a background of them just doing it on their own and then them getting picked up. So it kind of varies. I wouldn't say that it's always guaranteed that everybody that's with an agency is like a great model.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of just shooting with everyday people to, people that have been with agencies for a long time. And even when I've done test shoots here in Seattle or like even out in LA or in London, like sometimes even the people I shoot with, they're not new faces. Like if the agencies kind of like have some more like liking towards you, they may offer you somebody like on their main board, or just like offer other options than just the newer people. So then you'll kind of get more exposed, I guess, to seasoned models. So just getting curious and just searching and, just sending out that prayer, sending out that email and, seeing what can come back and just giving it a go and, seeing what can happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge testament to your work that you can send out so many emails and get so many responses back. This image in particular, I personally really love. There's also mentions in the chat of the framing on this is great. Is this the type of shot that you sort of capture immediately, or is this of a batch of images and you've chosen this one as sort of your favorite of that? Like how do you go about framing these ones?
So this one is definitely comes from a batch of images. When I'm out on my shoots, I mentioned in one of the London project videos actually, where when I go out and do these shoots, it's almost as like we're just hanging out. I remember this was at Greenland Dock, East London, and we were literally just walking to like another location, and I was just like, wait, stop. All right, just stand right there. And then I just pull the camera out and like take the photo. And sometimes like when I'm like changing film or like I'm looking down at the camera or I'm doing something, I'll catch somebody just in some sort of way. And I'm like, hey, can you do that again? Can you just hold that? So when it comes to like doing the portrait shoots, one thing that I like to have, or one thing I like to keep, is the agency of the model. I don't really try to force in my own narrative unless it's like something that we know is planned. Hey, this is like what we're going to do. But more often than not, I take like a more of like a candid, relaxed approach. And, whatever the energy is in the air is kind of like where we go. And, for this specific shot, actually, it wasn't even originally black and white, but for some reason to me that just felt right. It was originally in color. I think this is like Portrait 400. And I felt like it could have like worked in color, but I think there's just something about black skin on black and white film. And just the way that it renders, I think, is so beautiful.
I think this image as well, it lends itself so well to it because in its original format, it is so light on a color palette anyway. I mean, you've only really got pops of green and then little bits of blue sort of hues in that hoodie. So it's as if you've just said, well, we're almost there. Let's accentuate it, and it works. And the thing that I noticed so much about this particular image is the highlights across like the front of the face. They seem to stand out so much more in the black and white image, and the detail in the hair. It just looks brilliant. And was this cropped? Is this the format out of camera? Was this on?
So this is so this is on medium format. So this is the original. It was more like this, so it was a little bit more open, and then I kind of just brought it a little bit more focused in. So I do a lot of that too. I didn't even mention that. With the photos, like if there's any cropping that needs to take place, I'll just do it, there's no, just because it's film or whatever photo, like this is how you got it. No, that doesn't mean like that's the final thing. Like when you sit down and you edit these photos, just like how they did in the darkroom, like back in the day, they're making adjustments. And this is just, the post process is just as important in the process as you like taking the photo, because you're still getting to, obviously your end result. So, looking at this photo is like, I tend to play around with this, honestly, even with shooting color film. Sometimes I'll just convert them to black and white. And, some people are purists, I guess, of film may not agree with that. But honestly, at the end of the day, whatever you want to do, like just do it. You can take a film that's not as vibrant or have like a lot of saturation or a lot of pop, and you can still create that and put that in and change it to your liking. I think as photographers or as artists, you have that creative control. Like there's no rules when it comes to this. It's all subjective, whatever your taste is.
Yeah, there's such an interesting discussion around film photography, and it's definitely had a huge resurgence in terms of online content and social content. And there's such a topic of like purity in shooting on film, and it's just so refreshing to hear someone who, in my eyes, is talking sense of the fact of we're artists. You make what you want to make. It's crop if you want to crop it, just because it's on film.
Exactly.
It's such a I don't know. I find it an odd discussion that there's this thought that if it's on film, it hasn't been edited, but the stuff in you edit by taking an image. You're choosing to crop by what you have in your viewfinder. You tell your narrative from the moment you click it. So it's
and they've done that back in the day. If people look at contact sheets, you can see them circling in on where the crop should be, the adjustments and everything like that. So it's what we're doing today, honestly, is not anything new. It's just like in a different place. And it's funny because we're in Lightroom, right? Just the opposite of the darkroom. And here's just another example of, I was like, well, sometimes I convert to black and white too, because I feel like it works a lot better, because originally this is like pretty much how the photo came to me. Let me just put the white balance back, or let me drop this to color. Excuse me. From the lab. And, this is just, film does really weird things when it's like not exposed properly. There's just a lot of like color cast in here where I couldn't really just work out the way that I wanted. So I was like, I like this photo. And I was like, well, I'm just going to make it black and white, but who knows? I may one day just flip it back to color.
Yep.
If I want to go for like that gritty feel, I think it can work both ways. But, honestly, it's whatever you want to do. I have like another example here of just a shot that I took, a year apart. This is a pretty standard shot in London of the cathedral, and the left this is digital, and then this is film. So this one on the right is a lab scan, and then I'll throw my scan up. But I feel like even when I took the photo like a year ago, I was kind of like, as far as like color palette wise, it's a little bit similar, except for I think this is just a little bit more faded, and there's not obviously like a lot of contrast like in the image. But I feel like I've kind of been just drawn to some of like the looks in film, and even when I was shooting mainly digital before, and just kind of had film as something I could play around with. I felt like that's what I was always chasing. So, I would definitely say if you're going after that film look, maybe just even try shooting film, because after shooting it for so long too, you may just develop, the eye for, that specific look. And then you already know how to kind of create that here. And just this one on the left is a scan that I did at home. And I actually prefer the scan that I did at home compared to the lab. It was just a little bit softer, but there's just like these little things. But this is literally an example of, how different. It's like they're similar, but at the same time, it's still different from, what you can get from a lab, even if, you're still making your adjustments. So, and this is on 35 millimeter film as well too. So yeah, it really all depends. But at the end of the day, it's just like, do whatever you want to do. Whether it's film or digital, I think just the great thing, even with the resurgence of film, it's just cool to see people like out taking photos. Honestly, some people complain about the prices of cameras going up because it's getting so popular, or like trying to kind of gatekeep. But it's just like, if somebody's getting inspired to take photos, like that's just an amazing thing. So like, I feel like we should continue to encourage that. Digital or film, like the more photographers and people taking photos, and us just being able to share that passion with people, I think that's a powerful thing.
Yeah. Can we just talk a little bit more about your home scanning? So you said you use the Epson V600.
V600. Right? Yeah.
And
actually, I have it right here. Yeah.
Are you at a level of comfort in having a process that you can achieve consistent results with, or do you find you're still continuing to experiment with things?
I think I'm at this point, I'm able to achieve consistent results. When I first got into doing it last year, I did a trip to LA literally like a couple months after I got back from London to kind of do like the same thing again that I did in London, but just like on a smaller scale. And that was my first time scanning film. And this is one of the first rolls that I scanned myself. And this was like the original scan that I did. So like the highlights are just a lot. And within the Epson software, there already is tools that you can use to make the adjustments within the scan to get it the way you want. For those listening that may be familiar, sometimes when I do my scans, there's an option for like an auto color restoration. And it kind of gets it back to normal, because sometimes when you scan them in, and I've done it before, they can come in like really, really flat. And like I've been able to work it back in Lightroom, but honestly for me, I'm more comfortable making tweaks in Lightroom because I've been using it for so long. And honestly, I think with shooting film, I've gotten more familiar with how, these sliders and everything work. I feel like with shooting film, because I had to be more calculated with exposures, more thought about light and everything. It's just kind of played in just to the knowledge of being a better photographer with just technique. So this is what I ended up coming up with, like after my adjustments, kind of just bringing the highlights down. And I think this was like kind of like a hard shot for me to meter anyway, because the highlights are so strong, but I didn't want these shadows to kind of go completely black. So when I did a meter reading, I kind of just basically averaged the two, and this is like pretty much what I got. but here on the left is like what I shot with my Mark IV as well.
Okay.
And one thing I did was I tried to mimic the crop. So that's one thing that I've we were talking about crop. One thing that I like to experiment too with on digital is just taking that and, you going with like a square format or a 6:7 or, 6:45, etc., or even like a, 21:9 or something like that. Just changing the perspective sometimes is like really cool, because obviously like this is not how it's coming out on like a Mark IV, but I wanted to kind of create like the same type of feeling. And then I guess when it comes to matching like the process, I tried to get it somewhat similar, but I didn't need it to be like exactly the same. But even here, I feel like because I was able to see my exposure and everything, I feel like the highlights were a little bit better here than here, but I still like this.
Yeah.
So even though it's not necessarily perfect, I think with film, like I'm a little bit more accepting because obviously you can only control but so much. So yeah, with home scanning, I've definitely developed more of a process. I think black and white home scanning is actually pretty spot on. This is like another scan that I've done, and this is like pretty recent, just some black and white. This is Ilford HB5. This is actually 6:45. And this shot here is.
And do you develop the negatives as well? Have you done any of the processing on that, or do you take the negatives and then do your scanning?
So my process is I still take it to the lab. They develop it for me, and then I just go and pick them up, and then I'll scan them. But the only thing about it is just it's super time consuming. I spent like a day before just scanning in like tons of rolls. So it's never good to get behind on them. But I actually I keep everything. It's so funny. I feel like I'm walking in Kyle's footsteps here, but I literally have the same archive book, like with like all the film in here.
Nice.
There's a lot. There's a ton. So yeah, I drop it off at my lab. And one thing for me, because like I'm such a regular, they're typically get my stuff back like pretty fast. Sometimes like on a Monday, if it comes like right in the morning, or if I drop it off Sunday night, sometimes it'll be done by Monday evening. So yeah, these are all ones that I've scanned at home, and I've been pretty happy with it. Sometimes people kind of complain a lot about the Epson not being so great, and it might not be the sharpest, but if you're just posting your photos of social media, like I think you're going to be more than okay. Like if you're trying to put up big, huge prints, then maybe that might be a time where you want to go to the lab and get a scan. So this is Delta 3200. It's an Ilford film. Let me pull up another one over here.
We've also got another question. So scanning the transparencies with liquid or dry. I'm going to be honest, I'm unfamiliar with.
Yeah, honestly, I was going to say I'm not even honestly familiar with that myself. So I'll definitely say disclaimer, even though I've been shooting like film for a bit of time, and like I've been shooting for like 4 years now. I'm still learning like every day. So I don't know if that. Honestly, I'm not sure. I feel like that has something to do with like hand printing or something like that. But
yeah, I've never done it.
I'm not so sure.
I've always just done dry. I'm honest. Not sure what the wet scanning is.
I'm stumped there.
Yeah,
I'll have to ask around and look that up, because I'm not too familiar. So yeah, this shot on the left is one that I got from the lab. Shot on the right is one that I've done at home. So let me actually pull up the same. So this is 6:7 on the right, and this is 6:45. You can kind of see a little bit change in the aspect ratio. And then as far as like 6:45, like with medium format, 120 for anybody like that's not familiar, it's just additional shots. Basically, the negatives or the exposure is a little bit smaller. So depending on your camera, you'll get like 6 exposures. I shoot on an RZ6.7 for my medium format camera, and I actually have a 6.7 film back, and then I have a 6.45 film back as well. So I'm using the same camera, but I just have basically another film back to modify the experience. And I find that for me, those extra shots helped me a lot because I find myself taking like I like take warm-up shots, and I feel like my hit rate is not really that high. Sometimes I feel like it can be, but I feel like out of a roll, if it's 6-7, I might get 2 to 3 images from like a portrait shoot that I really like, and then 6-4-5, maybe like 6 to 7. So let me pull up this one like on the right, just so I don't know how well we'll be able to kind of like see the detail. But one of the things with the Epson that a lot of people talk about is just the softness of it. But I think a lot of times too, you just got to make sure one thing too, like when you're actually shooting, that you're getting your stuff in focus too, because I feel like sometimes I've seen people misfocus and then complain that their scanner like sucks or something about the live one, like, you just maybe misfocus. But
I think this is perhaps what the wet scanning is. So John's just added in some extra comments of so the wet scan fixes the film in the same plane. So the film is wet on the glass plate, so the scanner can focus exactly on it. He's also saying that he's not looked into it himself, but yeah, I'm assuming
I feel like I just saw. I think I just saw this the other day. Actually, somebody like doing this. Like I saw. I don't know. I don't know. I have to look it up, but I've never like really heard that. But I think maybe I saw it. I'm not too sure.
It's one to experiment with on your next roll.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I have a fridge full of film right now too, which for majority of this year I haven't really been just like stocking up on film, but I have, because I found myself in some situations where like I was shooting some film that I didn't necessarily want to shoot, but like that's all I had.
Yeah.
It's so funny just thinking back to what somebody mentioned about a commercial shoot. Now this year has just been something. Now that I'm thinking back, I've actually done like a few things like with artists, like commercial, like paid stuff, and that's like work that I really enjoy. But one of those situations, I got caught up in using a film that I didn't want to use, but I was like, well, I couldn't get to the store in time. I'm like, this is going to be fine. It's all good. Just get the photos.
And someone's also asking, I think we've covered this, but just to clarify, you're scanning using the default Epson app, or are you
Epson
scan or
Epson Scan 2. I don't know. I'm pretty sure everybody should be able to update to it now. At this point, I know when I got mine, that was the software that was available. I think before it was just Epson Scan. I know people use like ViewScan or like Silverfast, like Negative Lab Pro. Some people were use that like as an extension of Lightroom to get their negatives all set up and stuff like that. But yes, I think with anything, it's really just about mastering that, specific software and kind of going about it in a way that you can just, familiarize yourself with. Like, this is a scan that I've done at home, and like, let me show how it looked before. So this is like, this is Portrait 400, and Portrait is usually typically a bit cooler. I actually shot this in my studio here, my apartment, and had like a backdrop and everything in here. But I was like, this backdrop is like more cream, like it needs to be a little bit more warmer. So I just like made those adjustments. And then one thing I didn't touch on, but I'll say now is like sometimes you'll get this dust and stuff, or things that come in. I'll just try to clone stamp that, come in and clean it up. And then I just kind of cleaned up a little bit of the, just a little bit of the highlights here. Sometimes I like the stuff bouncing off like the nose. Yeah. But sometimes I'm just like, I'll just take it away. It really just depends. And then let me actually flip over to just one of these other photos here too, just real quick, because I just want to mention this quickly because I didn't say anything about it at all. When it comes to retouching portraits, I don't go in Photoshop at all. To be quite honest, like I've been in Photoshop before trying to retouch, but like I can do some things in Photoshop, but Photoshop kind of scares me a little bit sometimes because I'm just like, what is like all of this stuff in here? And I've gotten so comfortable in Lightroom, and I feel like I need to do it, but I have like a process for like retouching. So this is like how this looks before. I just basically go in and just get blemishes, anything that looks like it wouldn't be there like after 2 weeks. I'll just kind of go in and retouch, but I'm not a fan of like poreless skin, but I've just literally just kind of gone in here and let me make sure this is zoomed in correct here. I've kind of gone in and just clone stamped this out. And that's literally like all I've done. And sometimes it can take a little bit of time, but I feel like it makes a world of difference. And then since I'm going before and after, this is how the lab scan came back. So I want to say it looks like they probably scanned to protect like the highlights. But one thing too, I'm never afraid to really try to like push the limits of like the highlights. A little bit of clipping sometimes is okay with me. Like if it's in the sky, it's not like fully blown out here, but like a little bit on this hair with the hair light, the sun being here, like I'm okay with that. So when it comes to retouching, I literally just use like just the clone stamping in Lightroom. And for obviously everybody's skin is like different, so like just the amount of work that you have to do is just really like up to you. And honestly, it's not anything that you have to do, but I think it's a good thing to do. So this is kind of just like a little bit of the spots that I've like hit, and I just use like the default kind of settings, I guess, like when it comes in as far as like opacity, but then I'll just change like the size and the feather, and then using like the bracket keys to make this bigger and smaller. I find that super helpful. So like when I'm in here and then using the if it'll load up here, using the space bar to kind of drag around, and then just using the brackets to kind of make this bigger and smaller.
You get pretty quick at just adjusting.
Doing kind of going in there. Yeah, sometimes it comes in a little bit funky, and then you just have to readjust like where it's clone stamping from. Like I've clone stamped like stuff even on the street sometime that's like it may just be a little bit distracting or something like that. Not anything crazy to kind of like change the scene like completely or anything like that, but it just like all depends. But I just try to keep it natural for the most part. Just give back, I guess, what somebody could be expecting. And
is that mainly cloning or healing, or a bit of both, really, depending on the scene, I guess?
A bit of both. I mostly lean towards healing. I find that works a lot better. Sometimes cloning is just like it's a little bit too rough, like for me, and it just, I don't know, it just doesn't. If it's something like in the sky or something like that, mostly like it's fine. But on like on somebody's face, I find healing to be like a lot better. I just kind of prefer that. And then along with kind of retouching in clone stamping, let me see if I don't know if this one might have like a brush. Let's see. Okay, no, this one doesn't. So sometimes too, what I've done more recently is I'll like brush and to kind of like soften. I'll use this texture slider here, and I usually like -25, -20 on texture, and then I'll even like bump down this clarity because I find when I'm taking portraits too that I don't need a bunch of detail like in someone's face sometimes. And I'll kind of just come in and like soften it up. But since this image, I shot this like wide open, I'm not getting a lot of detail like in her face anyway. But that's something that I kind of more recently started like doing. So it's like, as far as my retouching process on people's face, it's been like, the clone stamping or the using the healing tool to do that. And then kind of coming in there with a brush to kind of just soften it up a little bit. Because I don't need as much detail, but it really just depends on the situation. And then
nice,
mostly just these close-up portraits that are a little bit more intimate, I'll kind of step into, but it's still even a process, it's just kind of figuring out
Yeah.
total kind of
Every image as it comes. Vince, this has been fantastic. I've loved seeing all your images, and I'm deeply fascinated by shooting in film. It's been a long time since I've shot in film and developed and whatever, and your work continues to inspire me. And I've got a few film cameras around, and I'm like, I need to stock up the fridge, get some film. Off. Yeah, definitely. So I want to thank you for sharing your work. This hour has flown by. For those of you guys who have been watching along, make sure you do go and check out Vince's work on Instagram and on his YouTube channel. And of course, check out the London project. There's lots of work in there, including a lot of the images you've seen today.
Yeah, quite a few actually.
Thank you for joining me today, Vince, and thanks to Adobe for hosting this. This has been brilliant. And if you want to continue the conversation, there is a Adobe Live Discord channel, so you can go and check out the chat in there. It's pretty active with a lot of people discussing things on the daily, and we'll be back throughout every weekday, and I believe there might even be some festive surprises coming up over the next couple of weeks or so. And this has been a great one. So thanks again, Vince. Lovely to have you today.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for joining, everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Peace.